All right, welcome everybody to this week's Entrepreneurship Seminar with Ken Krogue. We're really excited that he's here. I think this is Ken's first time ever speaking at Snow College. Is that right, Ken?
Pretty close.
Okay. No, he's spoken in another class, I guess, a couple weeks ago, but first time in this class. So we're really excited to welcome Ken. Just a couple reminders before we start. Tonight at midnight is the deadline for the September small group discussion. So that means you need to have posted one comment on your own that hits those two questions about what's your business idea and how are you going to apply what you've learned in this class to help that. And then you have to respond to at least two other people's comments in your group. So the deadline for your first post was Monday night. If you didn't get it in on Monday night, it affects other people in your group because they don't have other students they can go comment on. So that's why I do it that way. But even if you didn't get it in by Monday, still go do it. You still have time today if you haven't posted because it's worth a big chunk of your grade. And it will give other people in your group an opportunity to respond and have a bit of a discussion. Okay, so make sure you go in and do that tonight by midnight. The other reminder that's also due tonight by midnight is an extra credit opportunity that I messaged you all about yesterday, and I also posted about this earlier in the semester. It's the Southern Utah Speed Pitch. So for any of you that are missing attendance, you're missing quizzes, or you're missing presenter evaluations, if you enter the Southern Utah Speed Pitch, which is just a 90-second video, it will make up for all of those, for one attendance, one quiz, and one presenter evaluation. So you know who you are, those of you that have emailed me and asked, like, hey, how do I make this up? This is your opportunity. And it's an opportunity for you to take action on an idea. You've just been discussing and posting ideas that you have. Take it a step further now, enter this competition, make a 90-second video, and your chances are actually pretty good of moving on. So you've got nothing to lose. You've really got everything to gain. You've got confidence, learning, the experience of doing it, and potentially funding for your idea and the opportunity to meet other people, build relationships with them who can help support you and give you more resources for your idea. And if you get into the semifinals, which are in Cedar City next Monday, the Grit Center and our Economic Development Center will pay for your trip to Cedar City. That's food, travel, and lodging all paid for next Monday to Tuesday, So yeah, pretty great, right? That's all for posting a 90-second video, and then there's like one slide. So really, it shouldn't take you that long. It may not be your best work. You may feel totally busy and stressed out with school. I get it, but I'm here to encourage you guys to just try it. Just go for it. You know, you never know what could happen. If you don't go for it, it's like Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So those are my two announcements for today. And now I want to introduce Ken. Ken Krogue has an extensive background in sales, marketing, social media, and corporate analytics. He has applied that background as an entrepreneur, having founded two $1 billion plus SaaS software companies. That's InsideSales.com and InContact. And having formed and written several blogs that have had global readership. He has done research that has been published with universities such as Harvard Business Review, and MIT, and wrote an entrepreneurial column for Forbes.com. Ken attended the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and the University of Utah, and experienced a major shift in career path when he left after 2 years to serve a mission in South Carolina, where he met his lovely wife, Crystal, who was also a missionary. Ken and his wife, Crystal, have 5 children and 7 grandchildren and a garden and orchard in Spring City, Utah. So please welcome Ken Krogue.
Thank you, Russ. Really appreciate it. Whoa. That's me. I always do that. Okay. Well, Russ, I want to go on that little trip with video on Monday. What do I have to do? I'm in. Sign me up. You guys are coming into the business entrepreneurial opportunity at the most amazing time. And is it okay if I just download everything I've learned to help you be successful in the next 30, 40 minutes? I'll do my best. I'll try and save a little bit of time at the end for questions, but if you're just dying, go ahead and raise your hand. I always ask myself, by the way, this is a unicorn. This is the same slide deck I used to keynote at Roots Tech. A unicorn's a company worth $1 billion or more. And I learned that they asked me to speak because they knew I'd do it for free. So that's really why I speak a lot. But I've learned a lot in these last 20 plus years. And this is always the main question that I ask myself when I'm trying to help somebody with their solutions. I say, what would I do if I were you? And that's probably one of the most powerful questions you can ask, because it puts yourself in their shoes. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that's about the ratio we should use them. We should listen twice as much as we talk. We should ask lots of questions. Questions are perhaps the most powerful skill. And I was going down the entrepreneurial path quite well. And by the way, I love grit. I love that. Our favorite word at InsideSales.com was scrappy. Scrappy. We found that if we had a scrappy manager in charge of any one of our projects, both at a client and at our own, that was always what won the day. And isn't grit and scrappy pretty close? I love that. And you know what else? We did some research about the people we wanted to hire, the people who did best in sales, lead generation, and marketing. And we piggybacked off research that Vivint did, and they were some of the best hiring organizations in the world for salespeople. And you know where they love to hire? Central Utah. The reason is because you folks know how to work. You know how to work. So we're in the sweet spot right here, everybody. And thanks for all you do. Well, my world totally changed on September 2nd, 2015, when this young lady driving this Honda pulled out in front of a Ford 650 truck and trailer doing 55 miles an hour down Highway 89. I was coming the other lane, ready to turn. She pulled out without looking, and that truck driver hit her car, put her in a life flight to the hospital. He tried to swerve, and it kicked him into my lane at 55 miles an hour, picked up my 3/4-ton truck and threw it across the freeway, spun it around, hit the steel barrier, and I had a double brain concussion on my lunch hour. Coming home, bringing 4 batteries to put in my cool new motorhome I was going to go with my family. It hit so hard that the glass shattered in little pieces about 1/4 inch. The engine went under the front seat, and the 4 batteries, 2 of them exploded and 2 went clear across the freeway. And when I realized, it's like, has anybody ever been in a car accident where things just go slow motion? Or yeah, it's like, whoa, I could watch the dust particles explode and go in front of my face from the airbags, knock my jaw out, and when I calmed down, I could hear dripping and sizzling, and I realized it was the battery acid, and I'm like, whoa. So it was not my best day. I got my first ambulance ride, and basically the Lord reached in and picked me up out of my world, ranked number 2 in the world in social selling, number 1 in the world at inside sales. My company was knocking on the door of $2 billion, and I got a cast and internal injuries, and I couldn't speak. I couldn't write. The speaking came back pretty quick. I went to speak down in San Francisco at a big Dreamforce convention just a few weeks later, and got up on stage and started saying inappropriate things. Whoa! It's like, Tourette syndrome. And I realized I'm in trouble. A kid from Utah saying things that might get him shushed off the stage. I'm like, whoa. And my life just started to crater when the brain injuries started becoming manifest. And when your vertebrae accelerates to a net 70 miles an hour in a fraction of a second, because I was doing about 20, the truck was doing about 50, and that's the heaviest part in the center of your body, I had micro tears up and down my spinal column, and I found that I couldn't hold my head up by about 2 in the afternoon. This lasted for over a year, and it would get better. But the biggest problem was the psychological challenges I was having. And so I finally found a therapist who's one of the best in the world. Russ actually knows him quite well. And I found him after trying several, who had no idea that I had a double brain concussion. The front one in the cognitive area of my brain, the back one in the emotional controls. I gained like 35 pounds, couldn't control my anger, couldn't control temptations. And I said, "What happened to me?" And he said, "Well, let me put it this way. You've been blessed with an open mind." And I'm like, "Well, thank you very much." So I had the rare opportunity of remaking myself. And that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. In fact, I just passed the anniversary of my accident. So I learned that I had to redefine what I understood. And this was one of the most powerful phrases. The beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. In fact, a double concussion, it's called a brain slap, or basically, this wonderful therapist said I needed to go back through the things that had caused the structures in my brain the first time, and they would reactivate. So I actually went back to my roots. I pulled out my journals. I pulled out all the articles I'd written on Forbes and all the seminars I had made over the years for so many people. I used to make a lot of money, And I would go in, and I started, and none of that seemed interesting to me. In fact, a new side of myself opened up. I had the feeling to call that truck driver right after the accident. I had the accident report, and I called him up, and I said, "Hi, I'm Ken Krogue. I'm the guy you hit." And he says, "Oh, I remember your face." He said, "You didn't have a minute to even blink." He said, "I remember the girl pulled out. I only saw the back of her head, so she was looking away. I knew she never saw me." He said, "And I saw 2 beautiful children in her back seat. I knew that if I didn't move this truck, I was going to kill them." And he said, "I gave it everything I had. And all I remember is my truck moved, I hit her, and then I went right into you." He said, "I lit you up and knocked you clear across the freeway." He said, "How you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm here." I said, "I wanted to hear the story. I felt like I should call you." And he said, "Well, yeah, it was interesting." He said, "The police officer came to me." He said, "I did not go out." He said, "Did you go out?" I said, "I don't think so." I said, "I had this amazing experience where I went into slow motion, but I don't think I went out." And I said, "I'm pretty messed up, but it's more like internal stuff." And he said, the police officer came to me and said, and I asked him, I said, "How's that girl in the car?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. It's not good." And I asked, "How's those 2 children in the back seat?" And he looked at me, and he said, What children?" And I said, "Those 2 beautiful children in the back seat, how are they?" He said, "Son, there was nobody in that back seat." I'm like, whoa. And that experience changed him and changed me. And since that day, I've had a new sort of perspective. And I was on a crash course to being worth probably 300 or 400 million. And I found several of my colleagues who also started unicorns here in Utah. You know, several of them became worth $1 billion each. And every one of them so far have left the foundations that got them where they are. They've left their value systems. And I count myself blessed to have been reminded. You know, I was in the business of making people famous and making businesses famous. And it was starting to go to my head. And so I guess I needed a little jar to the head to wake me up. So I'm going to move quick now, and I'm going to try and share with you if I had to do it all over again and what I've learned, okay? So the first is education. You know, there's teachers, there's trainers, there's coaches, and then there are mentors. They're all very different. if I was to choose, I would find a mentor. And to find a mentor, you've got to go to a great teacher and ask them if they'll invest in you as a person over time. A coach and a trainer, they're pretty cool because they'll actually get down in the trenches with you and do things with you. A teacher oftentimes will just sit at the chalkboard, tell you, and the whiteboard, I guess, and tell you things. And if you choose to learn, it's up to you. Learning is a do-it-yourself project. And frankly, I had one great teacher and lynda.com. Does anybody know what lynda.com is? It's an online system where you can learn software. And I decided to learn Photoshop and Dreamweaver and Adobe Illustrator. And I learned how to do these things myself. So, 3 kinds of education. Most education today is to help us get a job. Would everybody agree? Help us become an employee. 100 years ago, only about 10% of the people were employees. 90% were entrepreneurs because they owned something. They took the risk for a farm, a ranch, a blacksmith shop, a little retail shop. They were owners, and owners is probably the main definition of an entrepreneur. So an employee goes to school to learn what to think so that they can go get a job. And then they will work, and the problem is they usually don't learn how to manage their finances, so they work and work. They were hoping to retire. They get to age 65, and the average person has less than $50,000, when a true retirement would be $1.5 million minimum. So they have to keep working. Now, they scale back a little bit, but that's an employee. They learn what to think. A professional is a doctor, a lawyer, a specialist, an accountant, and they specialize in knowledge for specific situations. So when that a situation arises, they learn when to think. And they have more schooling, and their goal is to retire earlier. They do a little bit earlier, but guess what? Most times they don't plan either. So they learn when to think. But an entrepreneur, what they have learned to do is they learn how to think. I had one class from Dr. Chauncey Riddle in philosophy of all things. And he taught me how to ask questions. And that was the one class I would trade for my $1 million scholarship to go to the Naval Academy and fly jets, which I never ended up doing because I went to serve a mission afterwards and couldn't get back in when we were done. Annapolis did not have a sabbatical program. So I ended up getting home. The only thing I knew how to do was knock doors. My buddy shows up with a gray Porsche and says, "Hey, come in business with me." I said, "Well, that sounds cool. What are we going to do?" He says, "Well, be an entrepreneur." I said, "What the heck is an entrepreneur?" And like I said, it's an owner. Well, the problem is you get to own all the problems too. But you get an upside like you can't believe. So I want to take just a minute and let's talk about, let's define what these different types of professions are. What's a scholar? We hear that a lot. But if we take a really simple definition of a scholar, they try and find original source documents to find truth. Is that a fair way to put it? What's a historian? A historian tries to find, they're kind of a scholar. They find original documents and try and recreate truth from the past. Is that a fair way to put it? The best they'll ever do is a fictional account that approaches something interesting that comes from their own mind. But the more original true documents they can find, the better picture they can paint. Is that a fair statement? And they might go into other kinds of things like archaeology or whatever and make a better picture of the past. What's a technologist? Well, most entrepreneurs end up being technologists. Steve Jobs was a technologist. A technologist invents things to solve problems. That's what they do. They don't really care why it works. They care that it works. Because if it doesn't work, they get sued or they lose money. A scientist, now this is, I'm going back to the original definitions of science. A scientist was someone who uses the scientific method to form a hypothesis, right? To do an experiment and to test the outcome. So they use science to find truth. And science would be the scientific method. Most of the time, we ascribe technology to science. It's not it at all. A true scientist uses experiments to find why something works or how it works. Most of the time, a technologist doesn't care why it works. They care that it works. We tested our software all the time to make sure it wouldn't break. I didn't care why it worked. I just wanted to make sure it never broke. But I learned something. I learned that if I tested experimentally to find why things worked and how they worked, I could duplicate it in other situations. And I'm going to show you why that's so powerful here in a minute. So, my very first business, I told you a little bit about it. My buddy shows up in a silver Porsche, tells me we're going to go sell laptop computers. Cool new notebooks. They were really small, made by Toshiba. The ones just the year previous were as big as a lunchbox. They even called them a lunchbox computer. And I thought, wow, this is cool, because I had a computer phobia. I went to the Naval Academy, and I was typing a paper for 3 days. This was back in the mainframe computer days with green screens. And my buddy comes up, but we had to type the paper and submit it to pass the class. My buddy comes up and says, "Did you press save?" I'm like, "Save?" There was actually a button back then that said save. So I'm reaching to push the button, and the screen goes, and I lost it. I said, I will never again work on one of these dang things. So I traded homework assignments with my buddies to do the computer work for me. And I got home, I literally had a phobia about computers. And I figured, well, okay, I'll tackle this. So I decided to hit it head on and learn how to do computers. And that's what got me into the technology world. But back then, I didn't know what I was doing with marketing either. I spent 3 weeks designing my business cards. I call this the business card rule. I never sold a dang thing, but man, I had cool business cards. The company was Portable Systems. I had a P and an S, and since they were laptop computers, I had a handle from the P to the S. Isn't that amazing? Wouldn't that just make you successful? I didn't sell a dang thing. So I learned from that. And when we started InsideSales.com with Dave Elkington in 2004, I said, "Dave, make me a commitment. Do we have business cards?" He said, "Not yet." I said, "Let's not even get any till we've sold $2 million. He said, "Oh, that's really weird." I know, said the humor. He said, he said, "Okay, I'm in. Let's do it." So we hit $2 million, and we celebrated by finally buying business cards. Go sell something. If you're in business, you got to move quick and get something going. So I told you, innovation. Innovation is really powerful. Innovation is to observe what works in other worlds or areas and see if you can apply that in your world. So the best way to be innovative is to ask really good questions and to observe. That's what we did with InsideSales.com. I had a job managing a dialer technology that would allow us to make 3 or 4 times more phone calls than just dialing by hand on a phone. This was the day when face-to-face sales was still big, and we decided we could get college kids who wanted to make a ton of money, and we could put them on the phone, go against the big $300,000 face-to-face salespeople, and make as many sales as they did if we could leverage them with technology because they knew technology, and they did it. It was awesome, as long as they were from central Utah and knew how to work. So we had dialer technology, but the hottest thing right around the year 2000 was customer relationship management software, CRM. Salesforce.com was just coming online, and the cool thing they did is they put CRM in the cloud. It was called software as a service. And we thought, well, that's cool, but CRM only improves productivity about 17%. We had dialer technology that would improve 300%. So I said, "Dave, why don't we be innovative and blend the two together? In the customer database, every time there's a phone number, click on the phone number, and it will dial the phone and pipe it through, and you'll be answering in a few seconds." He said, "Wow, that's cool. We could do that." So that was really the first invention we made. We put a patent on it. So we blended two things together and had a synergy that never existed before. And we could help people make 300% increases in sales. Does that make sense? We added more value. And that was innovation. So, how many here are fairly new in school, like freshmen? Okay, this one's for you. Hold on to this. This is one of the most famous articles I wrote for Forbes magazine. People would say, tell the orange extension cord story again, would you, Ken? By the way, when do I need to end, Russ? What time do I need to end? 1:20, okay. All right. Marty, if you see yawns out there, will you stand up and make us all get up and stretch? Okay? You're our yawn monitor. That way, if you guys start falling asleep, it's Marty's fault, not mine. Is that fair? Okay. So, in fact, this is practice, everybody. Come on, stand up. No, you got to stand up. Reach for the stars, fluff your pillows, get the blood pumping. Okay, now back down. Thanks, everybody. Okay, because this story is really cool. So I got a job early on as the marketing director for Infobases, and they were the ones that started digitizing books and putting them online. Now Google does it for free, but at the time it was really cool. And I showed up my first day as the marketing director. I'm in charge of the image of this company, right? And I get my paperwork from the lady at the front desk, and I notice there's this bright orange extension cord plugged into the wall, and it goes out and down the hall, and down the hall to the third office on the left. And I'm like, hey, what's with that orange extension cord? Thinking it might have just been put there that morning. And she said, what orange extension cord? I said, really? It's bright orange. It's right there. And she looked, she said, oh, I forgot that old thing was there. I said, it's bright orange. You know? And the next day we're in the company meeting with Paul and Dan, the CEO and the president. I said, by the way, what's the story with the bright orange extension cord out in the front entryway? It looks pretty bad. They said, what orange extension cord? I said, come on, you guys. I walked them out. It's right there. They said, oh. Didn't even notice it was there. I said, you're kidding me. So I went to the guy whose office it was in, and come to find out the circuit had been flipped because he had a really big refrigerator keeping all of his stuff, and he was one of the big shots of the company. So every time he put it back in his room, it would shut it off. And I'm like, I can't make this guy remove the orange extension cord as he outranks me. I tried to insinuate, but he wouldn't do it. So like 3 or 4 weeks later, I stopped noticing it too. And 6 months later, I coiled up that dang orange extension cord when we moved to another building. But I never forgot it. After about 4 weeks, I stopped having a fresh perspective. I got tunnel vision like they did too. And so from now on, when I hire new people, I give them a yellow notepad and I say, write down everything you see, because I'm hiring you and your brilliance and your power to help me make change. And if we don't do it quickly, you won't see it anymore. And you'll be just like the rest of us, and your value goes way down. We call it the honeymoon period. So don't be afraid to make positive change wherever you go, but do it quickly, because soon you'll be part of them. All right. This is also one of my best pieces of advice for you. If you, who here would be interested in owning their own business? Okay. I love you guys. This is my people right here. So I wrote this article for Forbes called 5 Things Business Can Learn from a Tree. And I'm going to walk over here and walk you through it. Can you still hear? I guess this goes with me, right? Technology. So the most important thing about a tree when you plant it is these roots go in all directions. What are they looking for? Water. Say it really loud. It's called cash flow in a business. It's called water to a tree. And as soon as that taproot finds water, it stops going in all directions because it has cash flow. You make sense? So don't focus at first until you find your mojo, until you find something that's going to work. But as soon as that thing starts working, look at this. There's no more branches. It stops growing branches and it grows straight up. It grows a big, thick trunk and it tries to get above the other trees. What happens if it starts branching out again too early before it gets above the other trees? It becomes a bush. So once you get above the other trees, then guess what? you branch out again. But this time you're looking for other kinds of things to add more diversity so that if something goes bad, you're still okay. This formula is so critical. I ask people all the time, I says, what are you going to do? Who's your customer? They said, everybody's my customer. I said, dang it. You're going to fail. And I try and teach them. I said, no. Narrow your focus once you know what works. But test like crazy. Remember the scientific method? Experiment. Test. The most powerful thing I can teach you today is a 4-letter word. It starts with T. It ends with T. It's pronounced test. Shoot bullets, then cannonballs. Bullets are cheap. Test like crazy. Then when you find something work, throw the kitchen sink at it and grow like crazy. Okay. The next most powerful thing is a technique we call research marketing. This is gold, you guys. Gold. So my salespeople came to me one day and they said, Ken, it seems like when we get these leads off the website, and by the way, I'm going to teach you how we did that. It seems like if we call them back really fast, we make the sale. I'm like, wait a minute. Speed? It's not price or quality or service. It's speed. They said, yeah, and we all know it. I said, well, then call, baby, call. And I went to Dave. I said, Dave, this is the most amazing thing. My guys are telling me, and we're doing a lot of it, that if we call back really fast, we make the sale. Oftentimes before the competitor even calls them back. We've got them closed. He said, that's cool. I said, Dave, we're the first company in the world to blend dialer technology, which tracks how fast we call and how many calls we make, with customer relationship management technology, which tracks whether we make the sale. I said, let's use the data to see how fast it takes to make a sale, and let's patent a technology that calls them back on purpose really fast. So we were in fact, this is the actual study. We hired some great writers, but I really wrote it. And we decided, look, hey, we got to figure out a way to make this thing go famous. Nobody knows who we are. So I'm going to tell you more about that in a few minutes. But we partnered with Kellogg University to do a pre-survey and with MIT to do the actual data analysis. The #1 marketing college in the world and the #1 engineering college. And we just crushed it. 750,000 companies downloaded this single research study that answered one question. How fast should you respond to the leads you get from the internet? Because here's what the data showed. It was amazing. We found that if you can actually see this fall off, this is at the 5-minute mark right there. If you can respond to a lead in under 5 minutes, the odds of making contact with that person go up 100 times. Not 100%, 100 times. The average response time was 39 hours and 22 minutes to a lead on a website. That's like going to Nordstrom's on a Wednesday and saying, I'd like to look at a pair of shoes. They say, well, why don't you come back Friday morning? No, the answer is 5 minutes. And if you respond within 5 minutes, the odds of qualifying them and getting them into the sales process are 21 times higher. We thought, how in the world is that even possible? So we started calling people back and said, we just called you in under 5 minutes. Why did you buy from us? And they said, oh my gosh, it's so refreshing to find someone who calls me back and doesn't waste my time. I like people that hustle, and I'm buying that as much as I'm buying your product. We thought, whoa, the internet has brought a whole new world into play. We made a patent on this, and this is what made us famous. We called it immediate response technology. We had another innovation. And it was so funny because Dave's wife, Elise, comes in one day, and she says, wait, are you telling me you put a patent on just calling people back? I said, oh yeah, I guess that's all we really did. So then we learned something else that's really, really powerful, you guys. It's called assertive media. Okay? Now think about it. Now this is a plague to your generation. I'm just going to tell you. This is what almost put us out of business. Because the millennials came of age, they started becoming managers, and they were used to two kinds of media right here. They were used to social and email. They were not used to phone calls. And this was still just coming of age. So we made our mark in this world where we at least talk to people. We found out that a phone call is 7 times more powerful than the exact same words in an email. And an email is about 4 to 5 times more powerful than social messaging. As you go higher up the ladder, the more assertive you can make your conversations and the better commitments you can get out of people. Face-to-face is still the ultimate. But you can simulate face-to-face, which is what we're doing now with the lockdown, right? With Zoom and everything. You see how this works? So do everything you can to build a relationship remotely as if you were face-to-face. And relationships are what make sales and marketing happen. Is this making sense? So if you start a conversation in social media, move it to a phone call, move it to a Zoom call, and meet them someday if you can. Then you lock in and in fact, it takes 5 interactions on average. Write that one down. About 5 interactions before a person thinks of you on their own. That's powerful because it's still about relationships. Now, are we okay to play a video here, Russ? Just a few minutes? Or should I skip it? It's really good. Okay? Dang. Let's see if this works, you guys, because this is really awesome. This is the best motivational speaker on the planet. His name's Les Brown. And let's just try it. Should we try it? That was my fault.
Telling someone, and they asked me, would you repeat that again? I was interested in going into broadcasting. I'm adopted. And that was my key out. I wanted to make my mama proud of me. I was very much appreciative of what she's done for my brother and sister and I. And that was my way out. And I went over to a radio station, asked a guy and told him that I was interested in broadcasting. He looked at me in my straw hat and my overalls. He said, "You have any broadcasting background?" I said, "No, sir, I don't." "What do you do?" "I cut grass." Young ladies asked me what kind of work I do, and I was working on a garbage truck. I say, "Well, I'm a sanitary technician." He said, "We don't have any job for you." I decided that was something I was going to do. I decided I'm unstoppable. I'm going to go up and hit. I'm going to do this. I started going to the radio station every day, developing a relationship with the people that were doing what I wanted to do. And that's what I encourage you to do. Whatever area you want to go in, find people that are doing it the way you want to do it and develop a relationship with them. When I decided to go in this area, I wrote letters to Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, to Zig Ziglar, to Dennis Waitley, all of the giants in this area. And I said, this is something I want to do. I've been following your career. Would you help me? Dr. Norman Vincent Peale answered my letter, did an article on me, wrote about me in the most recent book that he issued, and done many broadcasts about me. I'd wanted to develop a relationship and rapport with those people that were achieving those things that I wanted to achieve. By the same token, I would go to the radio station, and I developed a relationship with the guys. And they used me as an errand boy when they needed some food or someone to go pick up the entertainers that came into town. Temptation singing My Girl, Jerry Butler singing For Your Precious Love, Sam Cooke singing Darling You Send Me. I would pick up the entertainers at the airport and driving around in the disc jockeys, big Cadillacs. Didn't have any driver's license, but I was acting like I had some. Every day I used to go home and work on my communication skills, developing myself. It was Whitney Young. He said, it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. Start working and developing yourself now and prepare yourself for what it is that you want because you expect to get it. And when the disc jockeys were in the control room, I would go in and watch them and develop a trust level, and they would let me stay, and I would watch and observe them working the controls. When you want something out of life, don't worry about how you're going to get it. How is none of your business. The most difficult thing it is to hold the vision. It's to hold the vision. So there I was at the radio station. A guy was on the air, and he started to drink by the name of Rock. I was outside the window looking at him and watching. Hungry and ready, saying, drink, Rock, drink. Pretty soon, the phone rang. It was the general manager. I said, hello? He said, Les, this is Mr. Klein. I said, I know. He said, Rock can't finish his program. He's slurring his words. I said, I know. Can you work the controls until one of the other disc jockeys come in? Would you call them? I said, yes, sir. I hung the phone up. I said, now he must be thinking I'm crazy. I called my mama and my girlfriend Cassandra, said, y'all come out on the front porch and turn up the radio. I'm about to come on the air. I waited about 15 minutes. I called him back. I said, Mr. Klein, I can't find nobody. He said, well, why don't you go in there and work the controls until they get there? And don't say nothing here. I said, yes, sir. I couldn't wait to sit down at that turntable, Mustafa. I said, look out, this is me, LB, Triple P, Les Brown, your platter playing Papa. There were none before me, and there will be none after me. Therefore, that makes me the one and only. Young and single and love to mingle, certified, bona fide, and indubitably qualified to bring you satisfaction and a whole lot of action. Look out, baby, I'm your love man. I was hungry.
I could bottle that up. That's it. 5 minutes. Okay, I'm bottling quick here. I got one more really important story to share. And then I'll just grab a few more little highlights. This is Clay Christian. He just passed away. He was a friend of mine. Worked at Harvard Business School. One of the greatest thinkers in the world. And he was a teacher at Harvard. And his reviews were actually not very good. He was really concerned. This comes from a book called What Will You Do with Your Life? What will you make of your life? And he said, you know, I brought in a few of my colleagues to watch me teach. And they looked at it and they said, you're doing everything right. I don't know what's wrong. He said, I looked and looked and looked and I couldn't get my reviews up from my students. I was so busy, I had so much going on. One day I was on a flight and seated next to me was an old Lakota Indian. And he said, what do you do? He said, I teach at Harvard. He said, is it fun? And he said, I don't know if I've ever been asked that. Not really right now. I'm not doing very good. I'm teaching and the students aren't giving me very good reviews. I don't know what's going on. He looked at me again. He said, do they know you love them? You need to love them. He thought, never in all my dreams did I figure someone would tell me I needed to love them at Harvard Business School. He said, but I went home that next weekend, and I paused just before going into class, and I closed the doors. I had a meditation period, a prayer period, and I said, I need to love them. I need to love what I'm doing. They got to feel it through me. And he went out, and he became a legend with that one thing. You've got to love what you do. Now, there's about 4 levels, and I teach this, and the people would come back to me years later, and they said, you know, Ken, the thing I remember the most of what you taught me was the 4 levels of a company culture. They said you can build a culture of love, of duty, of fear, or of hate. All 4 work. They all get jobs done. But love destroys the others because it's self-generating. It's like a sun that just radiates. All the rest, duty is, even the word duty sounds hard work, doesn't it? I get it done, though. Fear, oh my gosh, that's like a black hole, and hate's the worst of all. So that one skill, that one concept changed my life. I decided life's too short not to do something that you love. So I'm moving quick now, Russ. I'm going quick here. So I'm going to go really fast. This is Google 2012. You see the red? That's Google coming up. The light blue and the dark blue, that's all the magazines and all the newspapers in the world. Google passed them up for ad revenue in 2012. And it's now crushing them. And Facebook is catching up and passing Google. The world just changed. So if you haven't figured out the digital version of advertising and direct response, you're not even in the game. But you have because you're making videos for Monday, right? The second biggest search engine is YouTube, owned by Google. So here's one of the magic rules that I've learned. It's rule number 1 for me. I used to charge $15,000 to $20,000 a day to teach this to companies. Divert a river, don't dig a well. When we started our company, now a river is existing traffic, existing need. Go find need and value and fill it. Don't create it. You don't have the time and you don't have the money. So I knew that there was a revolution coming where you as a generation were coming of age and you were going to destroy the old folks who didn't know technology. And if I could just give you software that could triple your productivity, we'd kill it together. And the name of this was starting to be called inside sales because the old way was called outside sales, face-to-face, right? And Dave says, what are we going to call our company? I said, Dave, the coolest thing you can do, I walked him to Google Keyword Planner Tool. Have you heard of it? It's free. Google Keyword Planner Tool lets you see how much traffic there is on every search term. I typed in inside sales, the name of this new category, and there were 40,000 companies searching on it every month. We bought the name from a guy who needed money right before Christmas. He started out $100,000. We kept working on him for 6 months, got him down to $3,000 that day if we could help him by Christmas. And we bought that name, InsideSales.com. It's now worth probably $1.5 million. And the first day we turned on our website, we got 7 leads. 6 years later, we were getting 35,000 leads a month. And we outranked everybody else because we had the name. So don't give some random name. Give the name that diverts the river of need in your direction. I once wrote this article. It was the most famous article in the world on Twitter. I went to the Google Keyword Planner Tool. Watch what I did. The number one way to find tips on Twitter was the keyword Twitter tips. How to use Twitter. Twitter tools. How to use Twitter tools for business. Twitter best practices for business. Twitter best practices. The top 8 keywords I put in the title. You see what that did? I ranked number 1 in Google on the top 8 phrases on how to use Twitter for business. That article had over 800,000 views on Forbes. And it changed the game. And I learned from then on, I've got to divert a river. Now, one last thing and I'm done. Although I had lots of cool other things to talk about. This is the second most powerful rule. It's called swim with the sharks. Now, I was asked about 4 years ago by Tim Ballard of Operation Underground Railroad to consult with him on how to make him a household name so that people would recognize he saves children. I said, that's a cause I can get behind. So I said, Tim, I'm going to show you the most powerful rule I got. It's called swim with the sharks. He said, what is that? I said, well, a shark is a major brand, like Tony Robbins. I said, you got to get Tony behind you. How are we going to do that? I said, you watch. Nobody can say no to saving kids. So shortly thereafter, there was a woman who stood up in one of Tony's $10,000 a seat seminars, and they said, let's give back after this seminar to some great cause. And she said, let me tell you about a cause to save children. And Tony says, that's amazing. I want to get behind it. I'll put up $100,000 right now if you guys will put up $100,000. They raised $200,000 in 7 minutes. Tony says, let's do it one more time. They went to $417,000 in just under 20 minutes. And Tony calls up Tim that night, says, is it really true we're saving kids? Tim says, yeah, there's 2 million around the world that are in sex trafficking right now. Tony says, I'm in. I want to come see it. And this last March, Tony's wife got involved, gave him a surprise birthday party, and they brought in all the sharks, everybody Tony knew, the leaders of all the businesses. And in one night, for Operation Underground Railroad, only 2.5 years later, they raised $18.5 million to save kids. That's what these little rules of digital marketing can do if you learn how to harness them. So guess what? I'm done, Russ. I'm only really half done, so if you want me back someday, I'll show you the rest of the slides. Thanks. Did I do okay today, you guys? Thank you.